Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Okay, today we're reading from Canto 1, Chapter 18, texts 24 to 25. Ekada dhanur udyamya vicharan mrigayam vane mrigan anugataha shrantaha kshuddhitas trishito bhrisham jalashayam chakshanaha pravivishtam ashramam tadarsha munim asinam shantam militalocanam ekada dhanur udyamya vicharan mrigayam vane mrigananugataha shrantaha kshuddhitas trishito bhrisham jalashayam chakshanaha pravivesha tamashramam tadarsha munim asinam shantam militalocanam ekada dhanur udyamya vicharan mrigayam vane mrigan anugataha shrantaha kshuddhitas trishito bhrisham jalashayam chakshanaha praviveshtam ashramam tadarsham munim asinam shantam militalocanam ekada dhanurudyamya vicharan mrigayam vane mrigananugataha shrantaha kshuddhitas trishito bhrisham jalashayam chakshanaha praviveshatam ashramam tadarsham munimasinam shantam militalocanam ekada dhanurudyamya vicharan mrigayam vane mrigam anugataha shrantaha kshuddhitas trishito bhrisham jalashayam chakshanaha praviveshtam ashramam tadarsham munimasinam santam militalocanam ekada dhanurudyamya charan mrigayam vane mrigamanugataha shranta kshuddhitas trishito bhrisham jalashayam chakshanaha praviveshtam ashramam tadarsham munimasinam shantam militalocanam. Mataji's. Ekada dhanurudyamya Vicharan mrigayam vane mrigananugata shrantaha kshuditas trishito bhrisham jalashayam nachakshanaha praviveshatam ashramam Dadarsha munim asinam Shantam militalocanam. Ekada, once upon a time. Dhanuhu, arrows and bow. Udyamya, taking firmly. Vicharan, following. Mriggayam, hunting excursion. Vane, in the forest. Mrigan, stags. Anugataha, while following. Shrantaha, fatigued. Kshuddhitaha, hungry. Trishitaha, being thirsty. Bhrisham, extremely. Jala ashayam, reservoir of water. Achakshanaha, while searching for. Pravi Vesha, entered into. Tam, that famous. Ashramam, hermitage of Shamika Rishi. Dadarsha, saw. Munim, the sage. Asinam, seated. Shantam, all silent. Milita, closed. Lochanam, eyes. Translation. Once upon a time, Maharaj Parikshit, while engaged in hunting in the forest with bow and arrows, became extremely fatigued, hungry and thirsty while following the stags. While searching for a reservoir of water, he entered the hermitage of the well-known Shamika Rishi and saw the sage sitting silently with closed eyes. Purport. The Supreme Lord is so kind to his pure devotees that in proper time he calls such devotees up to him and thus creates an auspicious circumstance for the devotee. Maharaj Parikshit was a pure devotee of the Lord, and there was no reason for him to become extremely fatigued, hungry, and thirsty because a devotee of the Lord never becomes perturbed by such bodily demands. But by the desire of the Lord, even such a devotee can become apparently fatigued and thirsty just to create a situation favorable for his renunciation of worldly activities. One has to give up all attachment for worldly relations before one is able to go back to Godhead. And thus, when a devotee is too much absorbed in worldly affairs, the Lord creates a situation to cause indifference. The Supreme Lord never forgets his pure devotee, even though he may be engaged in so-called worldly affairs. Sometimes he creates an awkward situation, and the devotee becomes obliged to renounce all worldly affairs. The devotee can understand by the signal of the Lord, but others take it to be unfavorable and frustrating. Maharaj Parikshit was to become the medium for the revelation of Srimad Bhagavatam by Lord Shri Krishna, as his grandfather Arjuna was the medium for the Bhagavad Gita. Had Arjuna not been taken up with an illusion of family affection by the will of the Lord, the Bhagavad Gita would not have been spoken by the Lord himself for the good of all concerned. Similarly, had Maharaj Parikshit not been fatigued, hungry, and thirsty at this time, Srimad Bhagavatam would not have been spoken by Srila Shukdev Goswami, the prime authority of Srimad Bhagavatam. So this is a prelude to the circumstances under which Srimad Bhagavatam was spoken for the benefit of all concerned. The prelude, therefore, begins with the words, "Once upon a time." And again, the translation. Once upon a time, Maharaj Parikshit, while engaged in hunting in the forest with bow and arrows, became extremely fatigued, hungry, and thirsty while following the stags. While searching for a reservoir of water, he entered the hermitage of the well-known Shamika Rishi and saw the sage sitting silently with closed eyes. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Om Jnanatimirandhasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupaha Kadamahyam Dadati Svapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guroho Shri Yutapadakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Haripriye Namo Mahavadanyaya Krishna Prema Pradayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namne Gaura Tvishe Namaha Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. Thank you everyone for coming. Please pray for me and bless me that I can try and speak something. So we've just sort of finished this section in Bhagavatam where there's this sort of building up in excitement for the eventual speaking of Bhagavatam. We've heard lots of the glories of Srimad Bhagavatam. Dhanudhar Maharaj, he comments that this section of chapter 18 that we've just finished, it's a sort of a wetting of the tongue to remind the sages just what's about to happen. And reaching a point where Sutadev believes he can't get the sages of Naimisharanya any more excited, he decides to begin. He says, once upon a time, now their curiosity has been piqued. And of course, we hear the glorification from both sides. It's also for us to get our excitement up because what's going to be spoken is very sweet. Of course, we heard earlier the sages glorify Srimad Bhagavatam. They say, even though the smoke of the yagya, it's protruding us, this is so sweet to hear. This Bhagavat yagya is, when we do normal yagyas, I know at initiations, I have to duck out every once in a while. It's a bit too much for my eyes. It's not too sweet, but then we'll get a nice result maybe later on. But with Bhagavat with the Bhagavat Yagya, with the Yagya of speaking Srimad Bhagavatam, every bit of it is sweet. I don't think there's a single point where maybe the smoke will get in our faces or anything, and we can feel almost instantly the result. So there's a nice little contrast. So then of course, we're going now into the speaking of Bhagavatam. We're hearing about Parikshit Maharaj, but as we've heard a lot in the past few texts, the speaking of Katha of the person Bhagavat, of the devotee, is the same as speaking Srimad Bhagavatam. In fact, that's the focal point. The Bhagavat Purana is in many ways mainly about the devotees of the Lord and their glories. So we're just about to actually start, and there's that nice little segue. And of course, here we see, we read in the beginning of Srimad Bhagavatam that when Krishna leaves Jnana and Dharma, they leave with him. And of course, Kali Maharaj comes in. And the pastime which allows Bhagavatam to be spoken, being the will of the Lord as it is, and not necessarily the result of any misbehavior from Parikshit Maharaj, is still very typical of Kali Yuga. We see the Brahmins the Brahmin boy is caught to anger, and Parikshit Maharaj in a moment loses his restraint, which is typical of a Kshatriya. If a Kshatriya does not have restraint, how can he rule? And a Brahmin as well. It's said that the work of a Brahmin in Vedic society is a little different than the work of the other Varnas. The Brahmin's work is mainly to typify and exemplify to everyone what the standards of civilization should be. And without that standard being set, then how can anything else be functional? And so we see those first few echoes in the cursing of Parikshit Maharaj, that the Brahminical qualities are not being so much manifested. And then, of course, it's not as bad, as he still has some potency at least. It's sort of degraded much more lately. And which is, of course, one of the central points that we hear from our previous acharyas. It's not that by being a Brahmin one has these qualities, it is by having these qualities that one is a Brahmin. And that's also then the glory then of Srila Prabhupada, as we see in Kali Yuga. There are lots of people who are not at all qualified to be Brahmins, and yet Srila Prabhupada has created so many people with Brahminical qualities. I remember there's a story of one GBC meeting, and there was this big debate. Obviously, in ISKCON we have controversies every once in a while, and there was one of those, and everyone was going back and forth, and Trivikrama Maharaj said, we're meant to be Brahmins, but we're here just bantering, like roasting each other. We're really going for each other. And I think it was Dhanudhar Maharaj who said that story. And he said he found that really instructive because it sort of showed to him that when the cultivation of actual Brahminical qualities is had, then all these controversies are resolved. So we will have far less issues if we, in society, cultivate Brahminical qualities. Of course, we're seeing here, when Brahminical qualities aren't necessarily being manifest, then lots of issues get created. But of course, this doesn't frustrate Maharaj Parikshit. Maharaj Parikshit is a pure devotee and he's fully surrendered. As we know, sometimes Krishna is referred to as the Ashray, but other times devotees are also referred to as Ashray, in a different sense, of course. And Maharaj Parikshit here is typifying that. He has the full surrender to Krishna. Because how else can we receive mercy if we don't surrender ourselves? If we are holding into our hands so many material things and not surrendering all that we are away to the Supreme Lord, how can the Supreme Lord give us things in our hands? We need to cultivate that full Sharanagati, and Parikshit Maharaj here is doing so. And because of that, he becomes a vessel for Srimad Bhagavatam to be spoken. It's said, of course, we are the Tatastha Shakti. We are marginal, in between a higher and a lower plane. And if we are to wish to lord it over things, the only option is the lower plane. To connect ourselves to the lower plane, that is the only way by which we can be the lord of anything. But if we wish to connect ourselves to the higher plane, being in that marginal position, we must surrender. We must put ourselves below. So in order to connect with transcendence, in order to connect with the higher points of our position, or at least the higher points to which we have access to, surrender is necessary. And that's why Parikshit Maharaj is fine in any condition. It's not an apathy where he just sort of accepts whatever's thrown at him. It's a full act of surrender, knowing full well that everything that happens is for his own good. I'm reminded of a joke one of my Jewish friends told me. It's going around in like the Jewish community, they all sort of make this joke. And he said there's, so a Jewish man has passed away and he's in the afterlife and he's speaking to God and he's sort of saying, so we were the Jews, we were the chosen people, right? And then God says, yes, I chose you out of all the nations I could have chosen, I chose the Jewish people. And then he says, and we've, you can see in our history, we've gone through a lot of suffering. And then God says, yes, that is right. I've put you through a lot of suffering. Then the Jewish man stops and thinks, and he says, could you choose another tribe next time? So sometimes there's this sort of mentality of Krishna should, or God should give us pleasure. But as we read here, these sufferings are instructing. They're very instructive, and in fact, they're the mercy, if only we can see them. Again, when we impose our own standards of what is good or right, and then again, what do most of us know, being conditioned souls, then of course we might see a negative where there's a positive. I'm reminded there's an analogy that's often used. If you were to see what happens in the average surgery, and just that tiny little snapshot of a person down on a table, he's been passed out, somebody's cutting him open and reorganizing everything inside him, you'd think that's not really the nicest of all things. But within the grand scheme, that's actually very good. And of course we hear in Bhagavatam, there's that famous verse of Krishna really favors someone, he takes everything away from them. And why would he? We read here that sometimes people can get too absorbed in their worldly affairs. And this is a common issue. At least I often hear it. Maybe it's different if you're a brahmachari, but I hear often, don't be so fanatic. You've got to be in the real world. You've got to compromise here and there. When we're existing in the real world, we've got to. We can't be all the time being devotees. We can't be doing this or that. You should do these things, because we can get a bit too comfortable sometimes, and especially that's maybe one of the dangers of grihastha life. At least that I've seen is sometimes, because of course Grihastha life, it comes with its own issues. Gaur Govinda Maharaj says, you might be able to please Krishna, but you can never please your wife. But so Grihastha life has its own issues sometimes, but, and I'm sure that works vice versa, don't get me wrong. Grihastha life has its own issues, but it also, and it has its own responsibilities that go beyond maybe any of the other ashrams. But sometimes those responsibilities and duties can become comforts. The privileges that are given in order for the execution of those duties can become comforts, things which people can maybe take relish in. Rather than seeing them as calls to duty, they maybe will fall back on them as a place to rest. And then those comforts, which were duties before, become anarthas. And becoming anarthas, they can become blockages to spiritual life. So sometimes it is very beneficial in spiritual life for Krishna to shake things up. And actually we studied this in university. We were reading about when are people most likely to have a spiritual experience, because we're observing how people it's a study in secularity. And we were studying about how there's this notion called the secularity hypothesis. And it's this idea that as societies get more advanced, as they are advancing in Kali Yuga, secularity will increase and religion will eventually die out. Unfortunately, for the proponents of this theory, it's wrong. And we're seeing that as we track history, there's no real trend in this way, that by progress in any direction, really, religion seems to tick on its own clock, so to speak. There's no real rhyme or reason to where there's resurgences or not. So of course, the academics find this very interesting, because it goes contrary to their idea that by the propagation of their wonderful ideas in society, religion will be eradicated. So we were studying this, and the most likely time for a person to actually have a spiritual shift in their life is what's called a liminal phase. A liminal phase is considered a passage in between two phases in life, and is most often typified by being in a hospital, by being in an accident, by having maybe a divorce or a close relative dying. It's a liminal stage is when you go from one stage of your life, but you haven't exactly entered into the next. There's a deconstruction of who you were before, but there's not exactly a construction of who you're going to be afterwards. So because of the entering in of liminal spaces, this is statistically where we'll find most people enter into a sort of spiritual awakening. And again, that's what's being spoken here. So I thought that was interesting when we were studying that. I thought that very much was reminiscent of Srimad Bhagavatam and our philosophy. And of course, then, and such things also help cultivate surrender. They're a wonderful reminder that we are not actually in control. And then we sort of feel directly that there's someone else in control. I know I had this because up until last night, I thought I was going to give class on text 23. And then I found out last night that actually I was listening, because I like to listen to the classes. I like to follow what's happening. Even if I can't make them in person, I'll follow them on YouTube. And I was thinking, wait a second. I don't think it's text 23 today. It's text 24 or 25. So, but then I read the purport and I thought, oh, that's fitting. I'll just surrender. I'll see what happens. So I that was something I experienced in line with this. But so we see there. So we see once upon a time. So now we see this great story of Srimad Bhagavatam is going to begin, or at least this great compilation of stories. And it comes in contrast again with this purport. It's speaking about the worldly desires. Because Bhagavatam is coming as a narrative in contrast to all the many narratives that we see in society today. There are these great stories and myths. Tamal Krishna Maharaj often makes this point. He was speaking about how when he was at university, people would speak about the Vedic mythology, and people will say, especially when they read like the 5th canto of Bhagavatam, they say, surely these are myths. And then Tamal Krishna Maharaj says, maybe they seem mythological to you, and maybe I can see how you think that, but how can this be more mythological than the idea by you being married and having children and living out a nice career, you'll actually find any happiness? The real myth is this idea that maybe I'll have a good career, Bhakti Vikash Maharaj often notes this. He finds this especially in India when he's preaching to, say, pious Hindu people. They'll often tell him, they'll say, I very much like your katha. And then he'll encourage them. He'll say, maybe take up to devotion more full time. Often he'll encourage the younger boys to become brahmacharis or something. And they'll say, no, my career is my sadhana. I will have a nice career, and by having a nice career and going to the temple every once in a while, I'll show the world that actually spirituality is nice. That'll be my preaching. But of course, this is not true. This is buying into the myth this is trying to mend the two narratives, because Srimad Bhagavatam comes in and it rules out any other alternative narrative. So here it is presented as one. And all the other myths cannot stand in its wake. And it pulls them all apart. That's what we hear constantly. There is no hope of material life anymore. There's that famous saying, if you want to hold on to your material life, if you want to hold on to your dreams of family life, of friends, of affection, don't listen to the sweet flute of Krishna. Because the moment you hear that sweet flute, all of those myths will dissipate away. What joy can there be? So here we have it presented, Srimad Bhagavatam. The once upon a time, as Srila Prabhupada says, it's beginning the story which will cast away any other myth that we've bought into, maybe, and which we are encouraged to buy into so much. It's not even alien necessarily to the devotee community. I hear often people will encourage, they'll say, come on the weekends, enjoy yourself a bit, be a pious person, be a good person, but then go have your career, be useful in society, and then just be a good person. We're just here to be moral. We're just here to be ethical. But no, we're not. When we read Srimad Bhagavatam, we're here to cultivate love for Krishna, and that is a full-time occupation. Whether you're a grihastha or a brahmachari or anything else, it's a full-time occupation no matter what. It is not compatible with any of the other narratives in society, and that is what we are hearing. Anyways, so then we read here that these pastimes are being performed in order to allow the manifestation of Srimad Bhagavatam. And we also hear that this same sort of thing happened for the manifestation of Bhagavad Gita. And I was thinking, of course, we have that natural progression Srila Prabhupada speaks. You have Bhagavad Gita, then you have Bhagavatam, and then you have Chaitanya Charitamrita. And I think it's interesting with Chaitanya Charitamrita and also Chaitanya Bhagavat, I was thinking, what's the sort of pastime that sets them up? Was there anything? And of course, their seeds, their roots are found in Bhagavatam itself. And in Bhagavad Gita, also in a sense. Of course, Bhagavad Gita is the famous conversation. I know I did book distribution once, and but this one time I was doing book distribution. I was there at Macquarie University, and there's quite a few Indian international students there. And I was talking to this one Mataji, and I was trying to get her to get a Bhagavad Gita as it is. And she said, I'm Indian. I know Bhagavad Gita. And I was like, oh wow, that's great. And then I tried to get her to take one, and I was speaking, I was saying, this is really good. And then she said, don't try to explain to me. I am a Hindu. I know the whole message of Bhagavad Gita. And I said, wow, that's really nice. That's really sweet. Even today, most people are not getting the message of Bhagavad Gita. I said, please share for me. I'd really like to hear from you what the message of Bhagavad Gita is. And she said, oh, there's a battlefield, Arjuna gets upset, Krishna says a few words, and then that is Bhagavad Gita. And I thought, wow, what a nectarian message. Sure, she's surely got the essence of Bhagavad Gita there. But then anyways, then she went off and just said, it was better than this other person. He said, oh, I'm a Hindu, and I said, wow, you're a Hindu, surely you should have a copy of Bhagavad Gita at home with you then. And he said, no, I don't. And I said, here, you won't find for a better price any other Bhagavad Gita like this. And then he said, look, I don't think I will take. And I said, sure. And then I asked him, and then he said, oh, my parents are busy. He was telling me his parents are paying for university and everything. And then he said, oh, no, I'm not so interested. I do have the money, but I'm just really not interested. And then I said, but you're a Hindu. You should really have a copy of Bhagavad Gita. And then he said, okay, I'm not a Hindu. And then he walked off. So, so at least she was, actually, no, yeah. So anyways, that's the And that's the message of Bhagavad Gita. But of course we know it's the, and then of course if we then study the essence of Bhagavad Gita, actually it's funny, Suhotra Maharaj gave a seminar on the essence of Bhagavad Gita, and he actually said there's 11 times the essence of Bhagavad Gita is spoken, is referred to in Srila Prabhupada's purports or the previous acharyas, and each one of them says a different thing. So there's lots of different essences of Bhagavad Gita. But at least as per the standard or most common presentation, we know the essence of Bhagavad Gita is Sarva Dharman Parityaja. Yeah, that's the climax of the whole teachings. That's the after explaining all of the dharmas, Krishna instructs, abandon all of these. But then we find later in Chaitanya Charitamrita, we find that Ramananda Roy is speaking with Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And of course, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is Krishna himself. And Prabhupada writes in his purports that Ramananda Roy's father is considered in some sense at least, to be Pandu, and Ramananda Roy is considered to be like Arjuna. So we see here it's set up again. It's almost a sequel. We've seen Bhagavad Gita spoken, and now they're reuniting for almost a round two in a sense. And in this conversation then, we hear this, Eho Bahya Age Koho A, this is external, speak further, and they keep on going, and then we keep on going through and through and through. And then we reach Sarva Dharman Parityaja. We reach the climax, the greatest advice of Bhagavad Gita. And then Mahaprabhu still says, speak further. So then we get further. This is a sequel. This is a building on. The implications of Bhagavad Gita, what Bhagavad Gita had to offer, are even more further delved into. So there we find some seeds in Bhagavad Gita for the speaking of Chaitanya Charitamrita. And then of course for Srimad Bhagavatam we know in the... I speak with my hands too much. In the apex, in the central part of Bhagavatam, when Krishna is manifesting his pastimes, we know he's sort of... It's funny because most people you'll see when they come to any sort of spiritual life, they talk about how they had an existential crisis, they sat down, they didn't know what to do, what is my life, what is meaning. But then we find in the Bhagavatam, Krishna himself is having an existential crisis. As we know, he's thinking, I'm Rasa Raj, I'm the king of all rasa, but Srimati Radharani, what is she tasting when she sees me? What is the beauty that she sees? I thought I had all of these rasas, but there's something that's beyond even me. Who am I then? How can I be Rasa Raj? So those seeds are planted in the apex, in the central point of Srimad Bhagavatam. And of course we hear. So then Krishna decides, well, maybe then I will take this love. Maybe then I will try and taste this rasa. I will try and steal it away. And so he comes then, of course, in Kali Yuga, because a thief, as thieves do, will steal in the night. They don't want to be caught. And what time is darker than Kali Yuga? So Krishna, he steals that love and he runs away with it. But the love of Srimati Radharani, it's such a beautiful gem that it radiates so strongly that coming in, he couldn't really remain hidden as much as he wished to. And as he goes in, we see that's outpouring of the essence of Bhagavatam. We'll read, if you see, like prior to Mahaprabhu, even Sridhar Swami, there's no real comment of Srimati Radharani. There's no real comment of anything. I was, one of my friends was sharing with me, apparently Madhvacharya said that the gopis received liberation because of their jnana. Their bhakti actually was sort of a sidestep, but because of their jnana that they received, they were jnana yogis in a sense. Their bhakti was sort of just cultivating jnana, and it was a mixture of jnana and bhakti. That's what gave them liberation. So these concepts were maybe they were elaborated on, but not to the full extent that Mahaprabhu does. So when Mahaprabhu comes, the furthest implications of Srimad Bhagavatam are shown, both in the pastimes and in the text. So the furthest reaches of what Srimad Bhagavatam has to offer, and of course we have a very special Bhagavatam. As we know, this Bhagavatam only comes when Krishna incarnates, and that isn't all the time. The furthest implications of that are found in his Leela. And then in his Leela, as recorded, we find then the furthest implications in textual form. So because the Bhagavatam, as we know, Vrindavan Das Thakur is the incarnation of Vyasadeva. And when he wrote Chaitanya Mangal, it was so well received as being that continuation. Gaura Leela is in no way divorced or separate from Krishna Leela. It is merely the implication of where Krishna Leela ends. in that sense, they see that and they see, well, this Chaitanya Mangal, this is actually the continuation. This is the Bhagavatam continued. This implication that's found in Gaura Lila is expressed further out in what was then renamed Chaitanya Bhagavat. Of course, then there's a second Chaitanya Bhagavat. But then, of course, in the community, in the Gauriya community, we know there was a bit of a divergence after the disappearance of Mahaprabhu. There were these three different camps. The Orissan camp, actually, I was looking at them, they sort of just never went back into the fold. They sort of really diverged philosophically. They have their own Panchatattva of these different people. Like they'll sing a different, they'll say the actual Panchatattva wasn't the Panchatattva that we hold to. There's a different Panchatattva, and their tattvas are similar enough that you can see they sort of came from us, but different enough that you can tell they weren't really drawn back into the fold, as the rest of the community was. And there's this wonderful book about this. I forgot the name. It's in the, it was published by some scholar, but a really favorable scholar. And they talk about how the Chaitanya Charitamrita is actually really one of the most fantastic texts ever, because normally when you see communities diverge, like in the Christian community, they come for a council, they'll have a debate, then they'll split in half. And then that's sort of how conflicts are resolved. But even though there was the festival of Khetri, that was what was done. Because, of course, the Bengali wing sort of was really big on bhajans and Mahaprabhu, and the Vrindavan wing was big on Sanskrit and scholarship. That was sort of the divergence that was vaguely coming. And there was a little festival to draw people in and discuss things. But what this scholar was saying, one of the great contributions that's overlooked is Chaitanya Charitamrita came at a very special point. At that point, there was 3 biographies of Mahaprabhu in Bengali, and there was 3 biographies in Sanskrit. Both of them typified either the Bengali mood that was coming or the Sanskrit mood. They were clearly written for those audiences and from those audiences. But Chaitanya Charitamrita comes, and when we read Chaitanya Charitamrita is profusely quoting the 6 Goswamis from Vrindavan. It's constantly, you'll find this is from Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, this is from the Sandarbhas, so on and so forth. But then it's also structured in Bengali. It was this merging of the communities. And what this scholar was saying was that actually the Chaitanya Charitamrita is such a potent text that it managed to do what very few texts could do, just on its beauty and just on its presentation and just on the masterful work of Krishnadas Kaviraj Thakur. He managed to restore together the community. The restorative work was also done in this text. So Srimad Bhagavatam itself is the pastime that establishes the need for Chaitanya Charitamrita. In the same way that we read in Bhagavatam here, the sort of bewilderment of Arjuna causes Bhagavad Gita to be spoken, and the bewilderment of Parikshit Maharaj causes Bhagavatam to be spoken. In the greater sense, the bewilderment of Krishna causes Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita and Sri Chaitanya Bhagavat to be spoken. So I thought that was an interesting little sort of build on. And that was also spoken for the benefit of all concerned. We know Mahaprabhu is so merciful. So by establishing that sort of existential crisis, it allows a point of vulnerability. How esoteric, how hard to reach is it to enter Golok Vrindavan? It's no cheap thing. I know we often say Srila Prabhupada, the savior of the world. I hear that often, and that's true, but it's not just that he saved the world. Salvation can be many things, but he made a salvation to the highest and most intimate points of divinity. They can't be reached anywhere else. And that is opened up by that moment of vulnerability of Krishna, overwhelmed as he is. And as we know, he's successful in his attempt to taste Srimati Radharani's love. As we read in the Shikshashtakam prayers, Krishnadas Kaviraj Thakur, when he speaks of Yugaitam Nimishena, he says this was also spoken by Srimati Radharani. So then at the end of Chaitanya Charitamrita, because Chaitanya Bhagavat mainly focuses on the earliest parts of Mahaprabhu's life, but Chaitanya Charitamrita, that second speaking, which of course gives so much reverence to Chaitanya Bhagavat, we find at the end, it ends there. There he is. He's tasted the pains of separation, the highest point of Srimati Radharani's love. Their mission successful, Chaitanya Charitamrita can end. Because that was something that confused me always. Because I flicked through and I thought, why is it ending? Because we hear different stories of why the disappearance of Mahaprabhu is there. And I was like, why is the Shikshashtakam the last thing? Because in that moment of the Shikshashtakam, the whole point of Mahaprabhu Leela has been reached. Of course, there's the esoteric reasons to establish the Sankirtan movement. But if Mahaprabhu didn't come, that movement would still have been established. But if Mahaprabhu didn't come, Krishna would not have been able to have tasted those internal moods of Srimati Radharani. And having tasted them then it is done. That is Chaitanya Charitamrita's elaboration. I remember hearing, I can't remember who, but somebody said, not in a strict sense that Krishnadas Kaviraj Thakur is like this, but if we are in one sense to say that Vrindavan Das Thakur's role was that of Vyasadeva in Gaur Leela, in a sense Krishnadas Kaviraj Thakur's role could be that of Shukadev Goswami. We read in Bhagavatam that Bhagavatam has been made ever the more sweet by passing out of the lips of Shukadev Goswami. In the same way, Krishnadas Kaviraj Thakur, with full deference, and not to say that Chaitanya Bhagavat is in any sense lesser, but with full deference and reverence for Chaitanya Bhagavat, he draws out even further the nectar of Gaur Leela. So so that's then the glories of Chaitanya Charitamrita. And as we hear, Srila Prabhupada writes here, this is done for the benefit of all concerned. Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, this knowledge exists in the pure devotees. It's not like they need to hear it, but out of their mercy they allow the pastimes to be there so that all of the people who aren't pure devotees, like me, we can hear it and benefit from it. And that's the importance. We don't read, if you visit a Gauriya Math, not that I do that often, but if you do visit you'll see they don't have constant Bhagavatam classes in the morning necessarily. That is the mercy of Srila Prabhupada. He realized the necessity, the benefit of this for all concerned, and then therefore he instituted this. So these books are very important, and it's a little sad to see. I think today, I remember I was speaking to Bhavananda Prabhu once, and he was telling me this. He said, the biggest issue in ISKCON today is he used a bit harsher words. He said everyone's philosophically illiterate. No one is reading Srila Prabhupada's books anymore. Well, back in the day, there would be like 3 classes a day, and everyone would be constantly immersed in Srila Prabhupada's books. Tripurari Maharaj would say when he went out on book distribution, literally the only thing that ever went through his mind were books. He was either distributing books, reading books, or taking a bit of prasadam. Even while chanting, he was chanting for the potency. He was hoping to be able to distribute books. His whole existence was Srila Prabhupada's books. The books are there for the mercy of everyone. And of course, we know that famous letter. Tripurari Maharaj, he was spoken his glories as a book distributor to Srila Prabhupada. And Srila Prabhupada said, yes, it is good that Tripurari Maharaj is distributing so many books. And many times he said that. And then at one point, Srila Prabhupada said, it is good for Tripurari Maharaj to distribute so many of my books, but he should read them also. And we also read later in a letter by Srila Prabhupada towards the end of his manifest pastimes, he said, maybe in one sense, and to imagine Srila Prabhupada even indicating this, the greatest of all preachers, he was saying, maybe we should focus less on constructing so many temples. I want that my disciples should go deep into my books, that we should boil the milk, not that we should preach and preach and preach and not have any spiritual advancement. So, therefore, Srimad Bhagavatam, as we are reading here, Maharaj Parikshit, he has gone along with the will of the Lord so that this mercy can be spread. Bhagavad Gita as well, we're hearing, is incorporated in this way. And Chaitanya Charitamrita and Chaitanya Bhagavat, furthermore, have done those things. So, hopefully we can relish those more as we go along. And, I'll ask for questions. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda ki